Hello and welcome to Head for the Cloud. I'm Simon Hanmer and this is another one of our series of videos around CodeCatalyst. And today we're going to be talking about how we can use environments inside our projects so that we can deploy through into our AWS accounts. So let's recap what we talked about in our previous video, connecting CodeCatalyst to our AWS accounts. Now, the first thing to remember is that CodeCatalyst is unusual compared to many of the AWS services that we use in that it sits outside our account. That means that we need to tell CodeCatalyst which accounts it can connect to and which permissions it's going to have within those accounts. Now, by default, we're always going to have a billing account that will connect, and maybe we've got a test account with a default CodeCatalyst role that CodeCatalyst deploys in there for us with a fixed set of permissions, and maybe a test role as well with a different set of permissions, probably more limited. And we've probably got a live account as well with both of those roles in there that will deploy through. Now, that lets us tell the space that we're working in CodeCatalyst in about those accounts. But what happens when we want to use those within a project? To do that, we're going to have to use the subject of today's video, a project environment. And what an environment lets us do is take one of those account connections from the space and bring it down into the project. We can then take that environment, bring it to a workflow associated with a role in the account, and we can then use that for actions such as deploying infrastructure or testing code. Let's look at that inside the CodeCatalyst interface. Okay, we're in our CodeCatalyst space, and as you can see, we've got a single project here, which we'll come back to shortly. But first, let's look at the space settings and see which AWS accounts we've got connected. You can see here we've got a live and a test account and our billing account as well. Now, I'm showing the first 4 digits of these two accounts here, and if you can note those, we'll use those later on. Okay, so let's go back to that project we were looking at. So we're going to our environments here, and you'll see that we haven't actually created anything. So let's create an environment and use those connections that we've got. Let's start with the test one. We'll give it a name, and you can see we can choose from either a non-production or a production. The only real difference between these is that if we select a production, we'll get a little badge showing just to demonstrate that this is a production account that we're deploying into. Let's give this a description and choose which of those accounts we want to use. And we're going to choose the test one. Now note that we're not saying anything about the roles that are available in the account at this point. Okay, that's the test account. You'll see here it's saying non-production. Let's do the same for our live account. This time we will tell it's a production account and we'll point that at the live. And if we go back to the environments list, you'll see that our live account connection now has a badge there, production. Okay, so we've created 2 environments and we can use these in our project in a number of different ways. Let's look at a very simple case first of all, where we want to use a command running inside our accounts. Let's start with a workflow. I've got a simple workflow here just as an example. And if we look at the runs, you'll see that we just have a single stage in this workflow called Hello World. You can probably guess what this does. If we come down here, we've just got a echo hello world. So let's edit the workflow. Let's just add an action that's going to run a command via the AWS CLI to retrieve those account IDs. So I'll just go to the configuration. I'll change the name of this action. And this is where we are going to choose our environment. So let's choose test. We have to choose it twice, and then we choose the role. And I'm just going to use the default CodeCatalyst role for this. The build command gives us a set of default actions. Let's replace that with an AWS CLI command. We're just going to call get caller identity, retrieve the account ID, and take the first 4 characters of that after the quote that we get. Okay, that looks good. We'll save that. And let's duplicate that action. And this time, let's run that action in the live environment. Again, we'll come down, choose the default CodeCatalyst role. We've got the same command there. Let's validate that and commit it back to the repository. Now, because of the way this is configured, I'll need to do a manual run. That's now showing our run ID at the top here. Let's open that up, and you can see that our run is now in progress, and we'll just wait for these status to switch to complete. After a short pause, we can see our run is now complete. If I go through to this action, the test one, we'll open that one up. We'll scroll down to our command, and we can see in the output that the first 4 digits of our account are 3814. If we repeat that in live, you can scroll down, see the command 2111. So different account IDs because we're running in different environments. I'll just quickly show you here that in the environments, because this is a simple CLI command that we're running, we're not showing any deployment activity here. While we're here, let's just quickly validate those account IDs we were seeing though. So we'll have a look in test, come through to the environment properties, and we can see our account ID down here. I blurred out most of it, but you can see the first 4 digits, 3814. And let's go back to our live account, do the same. And we've got those first 4 digits, 211. So let's come back through to our workflow. We're going to choose to edit that. And let's start by just quickly removing those 2 actions that we just added. Let's add some actions in the workflow where we are going to show some deployment activity on those environments. I'm going to use a CloudFormation deployment. We've got some CloudFormation in the repository here. So let's just add this. Let's go to the configuration, and we are going to have to specify the environment again. So again, let's go with test. First of all, we'll choose that role that we're going to deploy. And now we'll need to add a stack name that we want to deploy. Let's call this test CFN stack. We're going to deploy into my default region. I use London. And it wants to know where our stack is. And in this particular case, I have a folder called CloudFormation, which contains a CloudFormation template called CFN YAML. We don't need to provide anything else here. Let's just change the name of this action, deploy CFN in test, accept that. And again, we'll duplicate that so we can deploy to our live environment as well. So let's change the name. We'll come down and choose the environments that we're deploying to. We'll choose our default role. Again, we'll just call it test CFN stack that we're going to deploy into that account. And we'll specify the CloudFormation template. Let's validate that. Commit that back to the repository. And again, let's start a manual run. And with that running, we can click on our link up here. And again, we're showing in progress, and we can see our 2 new actions, deploy CFN in test and deploy CFN in live. And you can see actually here, I mentioned earlier that when we tell CodeCatalyst that our environment is a production one, we get a small badge. You can see that showing here against live. And now our run's complete. We can see our 2 actions here showing completed. We've got green statuses to show they've succeeded. If we come through to the environments, you can see that we now have deployment activity, and it's telling us which workflow action it was that's deployed. Deploy CFN in test, deploy CFN in live. And if we open one of these up, we can actually see that information in there. We can see the stack that's been deployed. We can show that it's succeeded. And if I open up my AWS account, I'm actually in CloudFormation here, and you can see that that test CFN stack has deployed successfully. So as you've seen with environments, we can use these within our projects. We can set them up in workflows and use them to deploy and run actions inside our accounts. We had that first example where we were just running a simple CLI command. And in the second example, we used a CloudFormation deploy to actually deploy some resources into our accounts. There are other actions that we can use as well. We've got Terraform actions. There are container-based actions for EKS, ECS, etc. And I'm sure over time that will expand. I hope you found this explanation of how we can use environments in our CodeCatalyst projects useful. If you have, give us a like, and maybe consider subscribing to the channel. That would really help us out, thanks. Of course, we have other videos on CodeCatalyst. I'll add a link up here showing the playlist that we have. And thank you very much for your time, and hope to see you again in the near future.